All right, tonight we're starting off with something a bit more grim, a time of disease, hardship, and humble meals. We're going deep into the real day-to-day experience of the Middle Ages. Forget the romanticized version of knights and castles. In truth, most people wouldn't make it through a single day. Before settling in, if you genuinely enjoy this kind of content, feel free to show your support and share where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Always interesting to see the range of folks tuning in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some ambient noise, and let's begin this journey together. Welcome to the year 1325. The upside? You're alive. The downside? So are the fleas. You wake up on a half-decomposed straw mattress, full of bugs and hay, still holding the scent of the barn floor it once was. No luxury bedding, no pillows, just a wool blanket that hasn't seen water or soap since last winter, now heavier with filth than a young calf. A distant church bell jars you awake. It's the medieval version of an alarm clock, louder and somehow crueler. Your home is a single-room wooden hut with no windows, where your entire family, a few animals, and an army of insects live side by side. The air is a pungent blend of stale drink, sweat, livestock, and the ominous possibility of mold. Scented candles don't exist, and even if they did, they just melt into the dirt floor. Stretching is a bad idea. The cold bites and your body aches. At 22, you're middle-aged, your joints crackle and pop like poorly maintained woodwork. Stepping out of bed is a hazard in itself. The floor is either soaked from rain leaking through the roof or crusty with who knows what from the chickens. Barefoot, you're now just another part of the cycle. Privacy is non-existent. Your entire family, plus a long-term guest cousin, are rousing beside you. There's no bedroom, no curtains, just one shared, chaotic space. Welcome to mornings in the medieval era, where solitude is a myth and you're never alone, thanks to the rodents, parasites, and crowd of relatives around you. And this is just the beginning. You've made it out of your makeshift bed. Time to answer nature's call, and it's not exactly polite about it. Say goodbye to any concept of a bathroom. No seat, no flush, no paper, not even the comfort of a reluctant plunger. Using the toilet in the 14th century is part endurance challenge, part social event. As a peasant, your bathroom is probably a wooden bucket behind your home, already overflowing thanks to a family member's bad meal. The odor is indescribable. After doing your business, you hurl the contents into the street. Yes, the street. You're expected to shout a warning in Old French, though no one moves fast enough to avoid it. Streets function as open sewers, rivers of waste, and unidentifiable liquids. If your town has communal latrines, you're slightly luckier. But it means sitting elbow to elbow with strangers in a poorly ventilated outhouse. Privacy doesn't exist, neither does hygiene. No toilet paper here, just straw, rags, moss, or maybe a scrap of fabric if you're lucky. Sometimes nothing at all. Makes sense why shaking hands wasn't exactly popular. Even castle dwellers weren't spared. They used a garderobe, a hole in the wall that dropped waste into the moat. A clever system until enemies figured it out and used it as an entry point. No matter your status, using the bathroom in the Middle Ages is a cold, public, and risky ordeal. One wrong step and you're kissing the street's contents. And you haven't even brushed your teeth yet, but that's coming. You survived the worst of the morning. Maybe you're due for a treat, breakfast perhaps, something warm and filling. Think again. In medieval Europe, comfort isn't on the menu. Breakfast is a bleak routine. No eggs, no coffee, no toast, just a humble bowl near the fire, if you're fortunate. Something resembling the muck scraped off a dirty boot. Here's your daily serving of stew. This isn't gourmet, it's a thick, sticky mix of whatever's available: grains, root vegetables, and maybe a few beans if fortune smiles on you. It's been cooking in the same pot for days or even weeks, with new ingredients simply added to the old. It's less a dish and more a perpetual, edible experiment. Alongside it, a chunk of bread so hard it could stop an arrow. Made from coarse rye or barley flour, it's often padded out with sawdust, crushed acorns, or other unconventional fillers. Since wheat is a luxury, you don't slice this bread, you battle it. And what do you drink? Not juice, not fancy lattes. You're starting your morning with beer. Why? Because the water is riddled with parasites and filth. So weak ale it is, low in alcohol but high in safety. Even children drink it. No one enjoys it, but at least it's not lethal. Meat or cheese, forget it. Those are reserved for Sundays or feast days, if your Lord feels generous. Most people see meat only a few times a year. Fresh fruit is seasonal and usually already turned into wine. Spices, only for the elite. A pinch of pepper might cost more than your wages. Salt is so prized it's under lock and key. So you chew your gritty bread, wash it down with medieval ale, and try not to think about whether a rat sampled your stew in the night. Breakfast isn't energizing, it just happens. And once it does, it's time to get to work. Hard, unforgiving labor, because your survival depends on it. Now, dressed in your one and only outfit, a rough wool tunic or linen shift, you're ready. Seasonal fashion doesn't exist. You wear it until it disintegrates or infects you. Underwear is a luxury. If you're lucky, a linen underlayer. If not, you go without, enduring coarse, sweaty wool stitched together by someone with little idea of tailoring. There's no washing machine, no soap, no dry cleaning. Your clothes are stiff, stained, and smell like something fermenting in a pigsty. Washing them involves hauling water, heating it, scrubbing with ash or lye, and hanging them outside if the sun bothers to show up. Shoes. If you have them, they're flimsy leather scraps with no support. Most go barefoot through mud, dung, sharp stones, and disease-ridden puddles. Your skin suffers. Constant itching from fleas, lice, and bed bugs. Everyone has them, peasants, monks, children. No one's spared. You'll be scratching yourself mid-conversation and no one will care. Your skin is raw, your scalp is ravaged. If a rash appears, tough luck. No doctor, no creams, just deal with it. If it doesn't get infected, it'll stick around like an unwanted companion. Now, dressed in discomfort and covered in itches, you head out. And that smile, best to avoid it. Not emotionally, but dentally. Toothbrushes, toothpaste, mouthwash, floss, none of it exists. Oral hygiene is as neglected as bathing. Some chew sticks or rinse with wine or vinegar, but otherwise your teeth are on their own, and it shows. By your mid-20s, your mouth resembles a ruined crypt. Cavities, swollen gums, and decay are common. Sugar is still rare but increasingly popular among the wealthy, who use it in tiny desserts or to flaunt their riches. If you're noble, your teeth rot faster. If you're poor, the damage is slower, fueled by rough bread, gritty porridge, and years of harsh chewing. Toothaches? Get used to them. They linger constantly, like the ever-present weather of the Middle Ages. A pain so intense it might drive you to pray, drink, or yank the tooth out yourself with pliers. And that's not an exaggeration, it was the standard solution. There were no dentists as we know them, only barber surgeons. The same person trimming your hair might be yanking your molars by candlelight with iron tools and no anesthesia. Got an infected tooth? Get ready for fevers. Without antibiotics, that could easily turn into sepsis and end your life over something as small as a toothache. What today is solved with a quick pharmacy visit could have meant death centuries ago. And things weren't any better socially. Forget about kissing. Bad breath was the norm. If you were single, nobody cared about your smile. It was all about land and livestock. In essence, your mouth was a war zone, and it was losing. Now with your teeth throbbing, it's time to face the day. Your real job, the one that breaks your body, is just beginning. There's no office, desk, or coffee break, and certainly no promotions. If you're like most people, about 90%, your role is simple: survive while working to benefit someone else. You're a peasant. You labor on land owned by a lord who likely doesn't even know your name. You start at dawn and stop only when darkness falls. Your tools include a wooden hoe, a rusted sickle, and whatever strength your body still has. There's no weekend, no punch clock, just 6 days a week of relentless toil. Sundays might be off unless there's harvesting, a raid to fend off, or a desperate prayer session for your infected foot. Work means manually ploughing fields or using oxen if you're fortunate. You dig, plant, weed, and haul water until your spine feels like it's permanently bent. No one asks how you're feeling. Mental health? Not a concern. If you're a woman, you do all that plus child rearing, cleaning, cooking, spinning wool, feeding livestock, and ignoring the lice your husband brought to bed. Children start working at age 5. No school or toys, just chores and a hope of surviving things like the flu. Not farming, maybe you're a blacksmith, tanner, or cooper. That means working with fire, chemicals, or animal guts in stifling conditions. Compensation, bare survival, benefits, occasional injuries, break a bone. Too bad. Fever, drink warm beer and carry on. You can't afford to stop, not even for a day. No work means no food. No food means being replaced. So you grip your shovel and press on. Because here, a job isn't a path. It's a slow motion struggle. And when your back is on fire from the fields, there's the weather. Medieval temperatures weren't about seasons, they were punishments. Winter meant no insulation or heating. Just wooden walls with gaps wide enough for chickens. Windows were cloth-covered, not glass. Fireplaces looked cozy but rarely had enough wood. Gathering it could be illegal and even punishable by death. You wrapped yourself in a damp wool tunic, huddled near dying coals, and still woke up frozen. Your feet were constantly cold, your hands stiff and numb. Frostbite wasn't diagnosed, it was just bad fortune. Summer brought no relief. Your home turned into an oven. No fans, no airflow, and no deodorant. You sweated through your clothing, which you couldn't remove due to modesty, sunburn risk, insect bites, and social norms. Flies swarmed your body, drawn by your unwashed state and the rotting remains of meals past. Mosquitoes droned in your ear at night, if you could sleep through the crying and yelling. The sun roasted you in the fields. No sunscreen, no hats, unless you made one from straw. And you still had to work. Heat stroke was just a bad turn. Whether you were freezing in your hut or drenched in sweat with chafed thighs, one thing remained constant. Your clothes still itched, and your food. Conditions are still dreadful, and there's no relief in sight. Welcome to Climate Control Medieval Edition. There isn't any. Thirsty? hoping to wake up with a splash of water. Too bad. In the Middle Ages, water wasn't your ally, it was a quiet assassin. Let's talk drinking. That stream nearby may look pristine and inviting, but appearances deceive. Upstream, someone likely emptied a chamber pot into it, or worse, a dead animal is rotting in it. Every sip delivers a cocktail of parasites and bacteria. That's why beer was the drink of choice, even for kids. It wasn't strong, it was small beer, low in alcohol, but boiled during brewing, making it safer than the ditch water alternative. If you were wealthy, you might opt for wine, though being productive before midday was unlikely. What about washing? In theory, yes. In practice, no. Bathing was thought to open the pores to disease, so many believed staying dirty kept them safe. Communal bathhouses existed, but were quickly seen as hubs of gossip and illicit behavior, leading to their closure by religious authorities. Even attempting to bathe was an ordeal, fetching and boiling water, filling a leaky tub, and hoping no one else used it first, or at all. Rainwater was no better, collected in open barrels filled with bird droppings, insects, and algae. Whether you drank it, bathed in it, or used it for crops, water was a gamble, not a guarantee. One unlucky sip could land you in bed with a fever, reconsidering your life choices. So, you're sick. You need medical help, but it's the Middle Ages and medicine is a blend of superstition and suffering. Diagnoses revolved around the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Feeling feverish, must be too much blood, time for bloodletting, courtesy of a dull knife or a hungry leech, often administered by your local barber. Feeling down, that's an excess of black bile. Treatment, laxatives, herbal remedies, or just prayers while others quietly plan your funeral. Break a bone or get injured, you're in real trouble. No anesthesia, no hygiene, just searing tools heated over fire, not for cleanliness but dramatic effect. With no antibiotics and no understanding of germs, illness was blamed on bad air or divine punishment. Upset stomach, obviously your own sinful thoughts. Treatment ranged from more leeches to crushed bugs and a priest administering last rites. If you somehow recovered, divine mercy was credited, along with the doctor and, inexplicably, the leech. After a long, brutal day, you return home, hungry and hoping for a decent meal. But food is another risk. Without refrigeration, preservation meant salt, smoke, or cold weather. Meat, if available, was fly-covered and aged in dubious conditions. Bread, a dietary staple, was sometimes padded with bark during poor harvests. Sawdust or even clay might be added just to make the bread go further. And if it's the right time of year, there's an extra hazard: ergot, a fungus that causes convulsions, hallucinations, and sometimes death. It's like consuming a mix of hallucinogens and disease. Vegetables are only eaten when in season. And what's always available? Turnips, endless turnips, boiled, mashed, or swimming in a stew. That's essentially a murky broth of mystery ingredients that's been cooking since before you were born. Fruit shows up in the fall but spoils quickly, and sugar is rare, costly, and hoarded by the wealthy as a status symbol, often evident in their decayed teeth. Dairy is another risky bet. Milk goes bad fast. Butter and cheese last longer but are teeming with bacteria. People eat them anyway because the alternative might be gnawing on shoe leather. Seasoning food is another luxury. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, or nutmeg are worth more than gold. For most people, flavor means onions, some salt if you're fortunate, and a general taste of hardship. Meals usually resemble soggy fabric dusted with despair. But food isn't just a health risk, it's a legal one. Hunting animals isn't permitted unless you're the landowner. Get caught catching something for dinner and you might be fined, jailed, or executed. Your supper could literally cost your life. So when you sit down by the fire with your bland stew, every bite is a gamble. But you eat, because food here isn't sustenance, it's survival. Night falls, you've worked hard, suffered plenty, and struggled to digest your questionable meal. Think the day is over, not quite, because divine surveillance never sleeps. Neither does the priest, nor does your neighbor Agnes, who won't hesitate to report you if you skip mass. Religion isn't just a part of life here, it defines it. It dictates your schedule, your rules, your learning, if you can read, your milestones from birth to death. Think of it as your divine landlord, and you're always in arrears. The day revolves around the sound of bells, morning, noon, and night, not as a reminder, but as an obligation. Miss a prayer, that's a sin. Eat meat on the wrong day, sin. Entertain forbidden thoughts, that's a sin squared. Hell is no vague threat, it's described in gory detail. Fire, blood, demons, and eternal torment. Can't read the scriptures yourself since they're in Latin, which only monks, priests, and the occasional privileged child understand. You rely on religious authorities to tell you what it all means. If crops fail, it's probably your fault for not praying enough. So you kneel harder. A tenth of everything you have is claimed. Grain, eggs, whatever you produce, even if it's barely enough. If you own nothing, you're considered both materially and spiritually in debt. Holidays aren't for enjoyment. They're holy days, filled with mass, fasting, and reminders that joy itself is suspicious. Doubt or dissent is dangerous. Heresy brings flames, witchcraft leads to drowning, and blasphemy earns lashes. So you comply. You chant, bow, and hope that enduring this life might grant you peace in the next, if those in power approve. Divine mercy may be infinite. Institutional mercy, not so much. And if life in this era is harsh, it's even harsher for women. Everything, filth, hunger, fear, is compounded by childbirth, submission, and near invisibility. Life as a woman is like being stuck on the hardest difficulty setting, without help and no second chances. From birth, your fate is clear. Marry young, have children, serve your husband, and likely die worn out. Education is rare unless you're from a noble family and sent to a religious institution. For most, learning ends after mastering household tasks. Marriage happens young, very young. It's common to be promised at 12 and pregnant by 14. Love has little to do with it. It's about land, livestock, and alliances. Your opinion doesn't matter. Once married, you're considered your husband's possession. Your role: bear heirs, cook, clean, manage the home, and remain silent. Complaining could label you a nag, or worse, a witch, which might earn you a painful death depending on local customs. Giving birth is life-threatening. No prenatal care, no sterile instruments, no pain relief. Midwives do their best, but even minor issues can be fatal for both mother and child. Some women endure many pregnancies, many don't survive even one. And once the baby arrives, your workload increases. Now you're juggling a newborn in a vermin-ridden hut while still handling meals, chores, and farm work. You don't get a rest. You were the rest for everyone else. Unmarried, you're suspicious, widowed, you're vulnerable. Bold, non-conforming women in the Middle Ages were often seen as threats. Those who had knowledge of herbs, displayed strong will, or simply behaved in unconventional ways, could easily be accused of witchcraft. Within religious life, women faced strict limitations. Nuns lived under rigid rules with little autonomy, their spiritual value consistently deemed inferior to that of men. Essentially, women were expected to endure hardship, obey without question, bear children, and suffer quietly, ideally with a smile. Despite widespread suffering, women were uniquely pressured to endure theirs with grace. By this point, you've endured squalor, hunger, inequality, and perhaps even an aggressive goat. But just when it seems things couldn't get worse, violence enters the picture. Loud, bloody, and broadly accepted in medieval society. Peace was rare. Law and order typically meant hoping the local authority wasn't having a bad day. Violence was embedded in daily life, at home, on the streets, in disputes, and even while waiting in line for bread. Crime was common, punishments were severe, and justice was more spectacle than fairness. Steal bread, you might lose a hand. Caught lying, expect a pierced tongue. Talk too much? Wear the scold's bridle, a metal mask with a mouthpiece designed to silence. Accused of something serious? Prove your innocence through pain. Trial by ordeal meant plunging your hand into boiling water or being thrown into a river. If you healed without infection or sank, you were innocent, possibly dead, but innocent. Float? Guilty? It was a cruel game with survival as the prize and no sympathy from the judges. Executions were public events, complete with cheering crowds. Hangings, burnings, and beheadings were all treated like entertainment. Domestic abuse was normalized. Men were expected to discipline wives and children. Street fights were frequent. Simply glancing at a noble's horse the wrong way could get you beaten. Warfare simmered constantly, driven by feuds, land claims, religious motives, or sheer boredom. In this era, violence wasn't the collapse of order, it was the foundation. Life was precarious, justice was unreliable, and a neighbor could attack you over livestock. Caution, humility, and avoiding armed strangers were essential survival strategies. You've made it through lice, leeches, dirty clothes, and the threat of public execution. Now comes the final chapter of most medieval lives, an early, unremarkable death. Living past 40 made you a rarity, often labelled the old one, not affectionately, but because few made it that far. The average lifespan hovered around 30 to 40 years, dragged down by high child mortality. About half of all children died before age 5, claimed by disease, hunger, or cold. Without vaccines, antibiotics, or effective medicine, survival was uncertain. Reaching adulthood meant immediate labor. By 25, most people were physically worn out. Missing teeth and fingers weren't unusual. Women faced high risks from childbirth, painful, dangerous, and often fatal due to lack of medical care. Men faced accidents, infections, violent disputes, or death in war. Even a routine trip to the market could be fatal if you encountered a thief or hostile official. Plague could wipe out entire cities in days. Famine could devastate villages. Death came through illness, violence, or pure misfortune, like eating spoiled food and succumbing to hallucinations and agony. Funerals were rushed, if held at all. Bodies were buried quickly, often without ceremony or proper graves, especially if space in the churchyard ran out. Life in the Middle Ages was harsh, short, and haunted by ever-present danger. There was no retirement, only absence. And with that, your chapter ends, avoiding disease and narrowly escaping execution over something as trivial as owning a squirrel, just another day in medieval Europe. Still dreaming of knighthood, it might be time to reconsider. The glorified image of the Middle Ages, brave warriors, noble women in towers, epic battles, and lavish feasts, has been carefully shaped by folklore and fantasy. The reality was much harsher. Life was brutal, inequitable, and unforgiving. Social rank determined everything. If you were born poor, that was your fate. If you were born wealthy, you had better odds of survival, but were still one bad meal away from disease and a quick burial. Even the upper class wasn't spared hardship. Castles were cold, flea-ridden, smoky places where marriages were tools of strategy. You might have a fur cloak and wine, but you also had a high chance of dying in a minor conflict or from a minor wound gone bad. It wasn't a golden age, it was a relentless grind. Tasks took longer, pain lasted longer, and everything, eating, giving birth, existing, carried risks. Life was about enduring, not enjoying. And even if you found a moment to reflect or dream, there wasn't much you could do about it. There was no social ladder, no advanced healthcare, and certainly no way to research strange symptoms. People lived, toiled, and died within a small radius of where they were born. Yet somehow they still found joy. They sang, told tales, fell in love, and gave life meaning. Not because times were kind, but because humans have an extraordinary will to hope. Even in the bleakest of ages, they made room for joy. So tonight, when you rest in a clean bed with running water, medical care, and a thermostat, consider the generations who braved famine, plague, and oppression so you wouldn't have to. Before she became Catherine the Great, empress, reformer, and symbol of ambition, she was simply Sophie. Born in 1729 as Sophie Frederica Augusta of Anhalt-Zerbst, she was the daughter of a minor German noble family. Her homeland offered little political weight, but Sophie herself possessed what no noble birth could guarantee: sharp intellect, magnetic charm, and an unyielding desire for greatness. Her childhood was marked by discipline. Her mother, Johanna, was emotionally distant and fixated on social advancement, while her father, a military man, kept his affections at arm's length. From early on, Sophie mastered the delicate balance of appearing compliant while thinking strategically. She immersed herself in books, mastered several languages, and developed a keen sense for reading people, skills that would soon become vital in one of Europe's most treacherous courts. When the Russian Empress began looking for a bride for her heir, Grand Duke Peter, she sought someone foreign, manageable, and easy to influence. Sophie was an ideal choice. She had noble lineage, practiced the Lutheran faith, which she would be forced to abandon, and carried a reputation for grace and modesty. At just 14, she was summoned to Russia. Dressed in light clothing and wearing a diplomatic smile, she arrived in icy St. Petersburg in 1744. Her mother saw her as a piece in a grand political game. Sophie, however, had her own strategy. To gain acceptance, she converted to Russian Orthodoxy, adopting the name Catherine. The act was more than religious, it was transformative. She wasn't just joining a new society, she was cutting ties with her past. Few, watching the quiet teenager in her fur-trimmed coat, could have imagined the future awaiting her, marked by upheaval, enlightenment, and power. But from the moment she entered the Russian court, she stopped being a pawn and began plotting her ascent. Catherine's marriage to Grand Duke Peter was meant to cement her position, but it quickly felt more like imprisonment. Peter, the future Tsar, was not the romantic ideal. Immature and fixated on military toys, he seemed more interested in imaginary battles than real governance or his new wife. Reports suggest the marriage remained unconsummated for years. Peter admired Frederick the Great and felt alienated by the Russian world around him. Catherine, in stark contrast, committed herself to understanding her adopted nation. She studied its language, history, and customs with fierce resolve. Where Peter withdrew, she leaned in. Their relationship wasn't just strained, it was politically dangerous. The Russian court was a minefield of manipulation, espionage, and shifting loyalties. Empress Elizabeth still held power, but her failing health signaled change. Everyone was maneuvering. Catherine was under near constant surveillance. Her correspondence read, her social circle monitored, her steps analyzed. She couldn't rely on her husband, her mother, or her household. In this environment, survival meant outsmarting the system. Catherine wasn't content to play along. She was preparing to seize control. Do you like this personality? Accusations surfaced swiftly. But Catherine was shrewd. She navigated the complexities of court life discreetly, forging alliances behind the scenes. She won over military leaders, connected with intellectuals, and earned a reputation for composure and grace, sharply contrasting her husband's immature outbursts and disdain for national customs. Privately, Catherine immersed herself in the works of Enlightenment philosophers such as Voltaire and Montesquieu. While many dismissed her as a mere consort, she was quietly crafting a vision for a stronger, more enlightened Russia. However, one obstacle remained: her husband. As long as he lived, she remained sidelined, a consort to a ruler unsuited for power. So she waited, studied, and plotted. She understood that the Russian throne wasn't something inherited, it had to be seized. In 1762, after nearly 20 years of calculated patience, her opportunity arrived. With the death of Empress Elizabeth, Peter ascended as Peter III. But his rule quickly began to falter. Within months, he had alienated the church, antagonized the nobility, disrespected the military, and praised Russia's traditional enemy, Prussia. He undid key reforms, embarrassed the clergy, and even considered replacing Catherine with his mistress. This behavior alienated the court, stirred unrest in the army, many of whom were loyal to Catherine, and diminished public support. Recognizing the moment, Catherine took decisive action. In July of that year, while Peter was away, she staged a peaceful coup. Backed by influential military figures, including her lover Grigory Orlov and his powerful brothers, she rode into the capital and was declared Empress Catherine II. The elite imperial guard pledged loyalty to her. Caught unprepared and abandoned, Peter surrendered shortly after. He was detained and soon died under unclear circumstances. The official cause was given as a medical issue, though many suspected foul play. Catherine was now ruler, not through lineage or marriage, but through strategy, intelligence, and boldness. It was a remarkable feat. A foreign-born woman without hereditary claim had ascended to the throne without warfare. But her biggest challenge lay ahead, turning her dramatic rise into enduring rule. Could she win the people's acceptance, secure the loyalty of the elite, maintain unity in a sprawling, volatile empire? Catherine recognized that power secured through intrigue could be easily lost. She needed to govern as a leader, not a plotter. Thus began her evolution into a reform-minded monarch. She aimed to redraw borders, adopt Enlightenment principles, and redefine the role of women in power. With the crown secured, she could have remained complacent, but her ambition reached far beyond mere authority. She sought to remake Russia intellectually, culturally, and administratively. While her predecessor admired military discipline and external alliances, Catherine was drawn to the Enlightenment. She championed reason, education, and progressive governance, even as she maintained autocratic control. She corresponded with leading thinkers, supported their work financially, and brought their ideas into her court. She studied law, debated policy, and initiated reforms to modernize the state. One of her earliest major projects was the Legislative Commission of 1767, aimed at overhauling Russia's legal system. Her written guidance to the Commission, the nakaz, outlined principles like legal equality, the rejection of torture, and the duty of rulers to serve the people, a radical stance in imperial Russia. But ideals met resistance in a conservative feudal society where the nobility held firm control over serfs. Catherine understood the need for compromise. While she curtailed some abuses and promoted secular education, she also preserved noble privileges to ensure their support. This was the essence of her rule, a public commitment to Enlightenment values tempered by the realities of power. She balanced lofty ideals with practical governance, navigating between European intellectualism and the entrenched traditions of her empire. Her goal was not to mimic the West, but to modernize Russia in a way that suited its unique character. Reform came with discipline, progress with control, an iron will beneath a gracious facade. Catherine's ambitions extended beyond domestic reform. She envisioned a Russia that was not only reformed from within, but respected and feared abroad. Where a previous monarch had opened channels to Europe, Catherine aimed to dismantle barriers entirely. Under her leadership, the Russian Empire expanded its influence and prestige, driven by a vision of enlightened autocracy and strategic power. During her rule, Russia's territory expanded more than ever before. She led military campaigns not only to safeguard her authority, but to alter the balance of power in Europe. A major focus of these efforts was the conflict with the Ottoman Empire during the 1760s and 1770s. These confrontations were driven by more than territorial ambition. They were about extending influence. She viewed herself as a defender of Orthodox Christians under Muslim governance and a guardian of Eastern Europe. Under commanders like Alexander Suvorov and Grigory Potemkin, Russian forces seized critical areas such as Crimea, the northern Black Sea coast, and valuable warm water ports, long sought after by Russian rulers. These triumphs held both strategic and symbolic weight. Each victory was a declaration that Russia had become a formidable European power. She also expanded westward through diplomatic deals, playing a major role in the partitions of Poland alongside Austria and Prussia. By the time of the Third Partition in 1795, Poland had vanished from the map and Russia absorbed vast new territories and populations. Her influence wasn't spread solely through war. She advanced her reach through reforms and development. New towns emerged, trade networks grew, and German settlers were brought in to cultivate farmland. The empire transformed into a vast and diverse dominion, stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Throughout this expansion, she remained deeply involved, reviewing reports, directing policy, and shaping her empire's future. Some accused her of being driven by greed for power, but she saw expansion as a ruler's responsibility. In her eyes, greatness was defined not just by vision, but by the breadth of land governed. Her goal was to transform Russia into a refined, influential state, feared, respected, and wholly loyal to her. Beyond politics and conquest, her personal life drew widespread attention. Her romantic relationships, numerous and often with much younger men, were well known. She did not conceal these partnerships and often rewarded her companions with titles, land, and pensions, so long as they stayed in her good graces. Among the most significant was Grigory Potemkin, whose intelligence and courage matched her own. Their bond extended beyond romance into collaboration on military and administrative endeavors, particularly in southern Russia. He acted almost as a co-sovereign. Still, her personal affairs fueled scandal and gossip throughout Europe. After her death, the rumors intensified, including a vile and entirely false story involving a horse, an attack crafted to tarnish her reputation. The fascination with her private life stemmed from her bold command of power in a world where women rulers were expected to conform to restrictive ideals. She defied those expectations, embracing life and leadership on her own terms. While some labeled her immoral, she viewed love and sexuality through a philosophical lens, seeing pleasure as natural and compatible with public duty. She kept her personal feelings separate from governance, something many male leaders failed to do. Her relationships were often calculated, choosing partners who were loyal, skilled, and politically advantageous. When they ceased to serve that role, she let them go with dignity and generosity. Far from undermining her authority, her private life was an extension of her political strategy, blending passion with power in a way that left a lasting impression. Yet her reign faced serious threats. In 1773, a formidable challenge emerged in the form of Yemelyan Pugachev, a Cossack who claimed to be her deceased husband, Peter III. Despite the obvious falsehood, many among the oppressed and impoverished population clung to his promises of freedom, reduced taxes, and land reform. His call ignited rebellion, especially among peasants, Cossacks, and dissenting religious groups along the Volga River. With inequality deepening and unrest mounting, his movement became the largest peasant revolt in Russian history. Towns fell, fortresses were captured, and nobles were killed. For a moment, the stability of the empire itself seemed at risk. This uprising shook her deeply. It wasn't a foreign enemy, but a rebellion from within. The system prevailed. She led with authority, but Catherine remained composed. She took decisive action, sending professional troops to suppress the uprising with force. Pugachev's rebellion was crushed in 1774. He was captured, paraded in an iron cage, and eventually executed in Moscow, a clear message to any future dissenters. In response, Catherine intensified her grip on order and authority. Her earlier aspirations to emancipate the serfs quietly faded. The revolt had exposed the limits of Enlightenment ideals in a nation still bound by feudal structures. She increasingly relied on the nobility, trading power for their loyalty and their dominion over the serfs. This marked a shift. The empress, who once cited Enlightenment thinkers, now placed stability above philosophy. Reforms became measured. Surveillance tightened. Even the faintest sign of unrest was to be crushed swiftly. Though Pugachev was dead, the warning he represented lingered. Power rooted in inequality was inherently unstable. By the final years of her life, Catherine had ruled for over 30 years, longer than any woman in the country's history. From the moment she assumed power, she defied expectations, reshaped her dominion, and redefined the role of a female ruler. Under her leadership, the nation emerged as a major European force. The territory grew by more than 200,000 square miles, incorporating Crimea, parts of Poland, and sections of the Black Sea coast. These gains were more than military victories. They were calculated moves to secure warm water ports and enhance trade routes. Her influence extended beyond maps. She was a patron of culture, helping to establish one of the world's great museums and building a renowned art collection. She engaged with the leading intellectuals of the Enlightenment and turned her court into a hub of cultural and intellectual activity. In a nation often seen as backward by its Western neighbours, she carved out a new image. She pushed for educational reforms, including schools for girls, supported book publishing, and introduced smallpox inoculation, publicly receiving the vaccine herself in a bold endorsement of science. Yet her reign was marked by contradiction. Though she admired Enlightenment ideals, she never freed the serfs. In fact, she expanded serfdom further. Her reforms, though significant, were largely top-down efforts meant to enhance the empire's image rather than fundamentally change it. Nonetheless, her rule brought a mix of stability and ambition. She understood that authority wasn't inherited, it was earned, maintained, and constantly protected. Her leadership wasn't based on divine right, but on strategic acumen, political skill, and determined resolve. She earned many labels: manipulator, despot, reformer, seductress, but above all, she was effective. At her death in 1796, the empire was larger, richer, and stronger than it had been for generations. She left behind a secure throne, an expanded realm, and a legacy that would endure. She didn't just occupy a position of power, she wielded it with intellect and precision, becoming a figure larger than life. Despite her accomplishments, she remained acutely aware of the fragility of her position. She was foreign-born, had come to power through a coup, and ruled a society hesitant to accept a woman at the helm. Yet she not only survived, she excelled. Catherine refused to be a figurehead. She was a voracious reader, prolific writer, and relentless worker. Her days were filled with reviewing reports, corresponding with diplomats, revising state documents, and navigating the intrigue of court politics. She didn't merely sit on the throne, she commanded it like a seasoned stateswoman. Despite the grandeur of her court, she often felt isolated. Surrounded by advisors, lovers, and artists, she still confided in her writings that trust was rare. Her relationship with her son Paul was fraught, as she feared he might undo her achievements. Her deepest emotional bond with Gregory Potemkin evolved into a lasting friendship, but his death left a lasting sorrow. She shaped her public image with precision, portraying herself as a maternal figure, enlightened ruler, warrior, sovereign, and patron of the art. But beneath those roles was someone who had endured rejection, scandal, and rebellion, and pressed forward. When she died, she left a changed empire and lingering questions. Could she have abolished serfdom? Did politics dilute her ideals? Was she more reformer or more ruler? History crowned her with a title she never claimed herself: the Great. Not for perfection, kindness, or justice, but for seizing and mastering power on her own terms in an era that denied women such authority. She didn't just wear the crown, she redefined what it meant to earn it. Whispers drift from the ancient Maya city of Palenque, where massive limestone temples pierced the jungle canopy, their weathered surfaces still guarding untold tales. In 1994, one of those secrets came to light. Mexican archaeologist Fanny Lopez Jimenez and her team were examining the modest pyramid of the throne, adjacent to the renowned Temple of the Inscriptions, final resting place of the mighty King Pakal the Great, when they spotted something unusual. A hidden, sealed chamber lay undisturbed beneath the structure, its contents untouched by looters. Upon breaking through and descending into the darkness, they discovered a silent stone sarcophagus enshrined in centuries of still air. As the lid was lifted, a cloud of brilliant red dust, powdered cinnabar, billowed up, coating the interior. There, amid the toxic mercury sulfide, lay the skeleton of a woman, carefully interred. Though her fragile bones bore no inscriptions, her jade mask and the surrounding offerings, delicate necklaces, diadems, and ear spools of jade and shell, spoke of royalty. Dubbed the Red Queen, she emerged as one of the richest female burials unearthed in Mesoamerica, yet her identity remained a mystery. Queen, priestess, or perhaps Pakal's consort. Radiocarbon dating placed her around the 7th century, Palank's golden age. Unlike most Maya tombs, hers had been deliberately hidden and sealed, suggesting a ritualistic, spiritual purpose rather than mere ceremony. The thick layer of cinnabar, clinging like dried blood to stone, bones, and offerings, was more than decoration. To the Maya, its fiery hue represented blood, rebirth, and the life force bridging the mortal world and the divine. Applying cinnabar to the dead was believed to facilitate their passage into the next realm, transforming them for deification rather than preserving them indefinitely. Yet cinnabar's potency came with danger. Repeated exposure causes mercury poisoning, tremors, hallucinations, even death. Although the Maya had no chemical knowledge of its toxicity, they revered its power, reserving it for the most exalted burials. Remarkably, Pakal himself was also adorned with cinnabar, hinting at a connection of equal divine stature between king and Red Queen. Her skull rested on jaguar skin, another potent symbol, while bone needles, obsidian blades, and tiny jade figurines lay scattered around her, relics of rituals performed in life or death. At her sides were heavy jade necklaces, their polished green still vibrant after centuries underground. Jade signified eternal life, the vitality of maize, and the breath of the gods, and only the elite were granted such luxury. The mosaic jade mask covering her face, unlike the gold death masks of Egypt, was made of hundreds of tiny tiles crafted to fit her skull's contours, serving to protect her soul, preserve her identity, and present her before the gods as divine. In utter silence, broken only by the gleam of jade, shell, and obsidian, the Red Queen's tomb remains a story without words, a testament to power cloaked in ritual, color, and enduring mystery. There were bone needles, obsidian blades, and shell artifacts, items that may have served as ritual tools or markers of her status as a priestess, healer, or matriarch. One bone pin bore faint but deliberate engravings, a subtle echo of her presence across time. Surrounding her, ceramic vessels remained sealed, likely once containing offerings, perhaps food, drink, or incense, to aid her spirit on its journey beyond death. The Maya viewed the afterlife as a perilous and layered voyage filled with trials. These objects weren't ornamental, they were essential. The tomb itself feels deliberate and personal, lacking extravagance but rich in spiritual intent. No gold, no vehicles of status, just purposefully selected items forming a spiritual map. Through these artifacts, their understanding of death emerges, not as an end, but as a transfer of power. She wasn't laid to rest to be forgotten. She was being readied for transformation. Despite the majesty of the burial, one absence lingers. Her name. No inscription marked the sarcophagus or walls. She was clearly significant, but who was she? Scholars began piecing together the clues from the moment the tomb was opened. The most persuasive theory identifies her as a royal woman, the wife of a powerful ruler known for his monumental influence. She was born into nobility, married into the dynasty young, and bore several sons who achieved prominence. During her husband's rule, she played a pivotal ceremonial role. Such honours in death would befit her. The tomb's proximity to his own, located just steps away, suggests a deliberate pairing, partners in life and in death. A striking feature further ties them together. Both burials were enveloped in a dense layer of cinnabar, a rarity. This connection is unlikely to be accidental. Yet the mystery deepens. DNA testing was conducted in hopes of confirming a familial link, but the findings were inconclusive. Her remains showed no maternal connection, though this doesn't preclude a marital bond. Marriage is not bound by shared blood. Some believe she might have been a queen regent, a high priestess, a sister, or another royal figure whose name was simply lost over time. Still, the strongest evidence supports her as a queen by title, a mother of kings and a spiritual companion to the ruler. The absence of a name may have been deliberate. In Maya belief, legacy endured through ritual, symbolism, and the memory carried by the earth, not through stone inscriptions. Thus, she endures in the space between history and myth, a powerful woman remembered in red and silence. To grasp who she was, one must understand her world, a society where royal women held considerable sway. In Maya politics, family ties were critical. Royal women were not passive figures, they were diplomats, priestesses, and strategic actors. They led ceremonies, commissioned temples, and upheld dynastic claims. Their heritage served as political leverage. For instance, when the throne stood empty, one royal mother ruled as regent until her son matured, exercising real power through edicts and infrastructure projects. She wasn't an exception. Across the Maya realm, women are depicted performing major rites, engaging in diplomacy, and at times leading outright. They appear in carvings and murals adorned with regalia, often shown beside or even above kings. These women's names and deeds were once immortalized until colonial narratives obscured them. Archaeology, however, reveals a complex landscape of negotiated power and fluid gender roles. Seen through this lens, the Red Queen's burial takes on greater meaning. She may not have reigned in name, but her sacred, strategically located tomb marks her as a key figure in royal life. Her jade mask was not mere ornament, it represented identity, authority, and spiritual continuity. Her lineage may have been the cornerstone of the royal family's endurance. In Maya tradition, a queen was more than a title. She was a guardian of bloodlines, a ritual voice, and a vital link between the divine and the mortal. Though nameless to us, in her world, her presence was profound. She was laid to rest in a structure rich with meaning, steeped in Maya cosmology, ritual symbolism, and precise architectural intent. Her resting place was more than a grave, it was a portal to eternity. Her remains were discovered in Temple 3, a smaller pyramid situated in the ceremonial core of the city. Its location, close to the grand temple of the inscriptions where a revered ruler lies, speaks volumes. These structures were not placed haphazardly. Their arrangement followed sacred principles informed by astronomy, mythology, and royal lineage. Temple 3 may appear modest next to its imposing neighbour, but it conceals something profoundly personal, a sealed chamber, untouched and pristine. Built deep within, reachable only via a steep and narrow stairway, the descent into the tomb evokes a symbolic journey into the underworld. The burial chamber, carved from stone and undisturbed for over 1,130 years, is devoid of decoration. There are no glyphs or elaborate carvings, only silence. Perhaps that quiet is deliberate, a space meant not for the living, but for transformation after death. At the centre lies a limestone sarcophagus, reminiscent of the grand stone coffin nearby. While that neighbouring tomb features elaborate carvings of cosmic renewal, hers is understated, centred on the body, the red mineral, and the rites of death. Yet even in its simplicity, the tomb contains clues. Its east-west orientation mirrors the sun's path and suggests symbolic passage. Though compact, the chamber radiates significance, intimate, intentional, and sacred. These sacred structures were more than monuments. They were designed as connections between sky, earth, and the underworld. To be buried within one was to transcend human bounds. This tomb was no afterthought. It was a shrine built for transformation. Her remains lie in stone, her presence marked by red pigment, her legacy enshrined in the structure itself, a silent testament to her importance. For the ancient Maya, death marked not an end, but a passage into Xibalba, the underworld. For someone of her stature, this transition carried spiritual, political, and cosmological weight. Funerary rituals were mythic enactments meant to guide the soul through the dangers of the afterlife, a place of trials, shadowy gods, and flowing blood. Only those ritually prepared could hope to navigate it. She was interred in red pigment, encased in stone, and surrounded by symbolic objects, all hallmarks of elite burial. The discovery of bone needles and obsidian blades suggests acts of self-sacrifice, either performed in life or symbolically reenacted in death, to fortify her spirit. A jade funerary mask delicately pieced together may have served as a spiritual anchor for her identity, vital for recognition by the gods. Ceramic vessels likely once held nourishing substances for her journey beyond: cacao, maize, water, or pulque. Items like stingray spines or shell trumpets could have functioned as sacred instruments, divine messengers, or ritual tokens. This was not a farewell, but a metamorphosis. The Maya viewed death as the planting of a seed, with burial as cultivation, and the afterlife as renewal. Royalty was seen as earthly embodiments of deities who in death returned to their divine origins. She, cloaked in red, placed in a pyramid, and honoured with sacred offerings, was prepared for rebirth, not as a mere mortal, but as one intertwined with the sacred cosmic cycle. Nearby rests another iconic tomb of Mesoamerica, that of Kinich Janab Pakal, a revered leader whose interment in the Grand Temple is famed for its scale and spiritual depth. Yet what sets her tomb apart is not only its contents, but its location, hidden in a temple adjacent to this legendary burial. In a city where architectural alignment followed celestial and mythic principles, this closeness was deliberate, an assertion carved into stone. Many researchers suggest she was a queen, perhaps the consort of the nearby ruler. While her tomb lacks inscriptions, the parallels are compelling. Both were wrapped in red, interred in pyramids, adorned with jade, and accorded the highest honours. Their burials seem to reflect each other, complementary halves of a sacred narrative. While one sarcophagus portrays a dramatic, cosmic descent, the other whispers of an equally profound transformation, death and renewal. The Red Queen's more modest resting place lacks overt imagery, but its meaning lies in the pairing itself. If Pal symbolized the sun, descending into the underworld by night and rising anew, then the Red Queen could be seen as the moon, a feminine presence charting a mysterious course through the heavens. Together, they represented a cosmic balance, masculine and feminine, sovereign and consort, sun and moon, structure and ceremony. In Maya belief, leadership was not solitary, it was relational. Cosmic harmony required equilibrium, which extended into royal life. By placing the Red Queen beside Pal, the Maya were preserving not just a union, but a sacred alignment. Their closeness in death may have reflected a shared purpose in life. She was not behind him, but beside him, participating in both rule and legacy. In silence, their tombs convey a message. Two lives bound in cinnabar and stone, united across time. A sacred silence that endures. Though her name is lost, the Red Queen lives on, not as a forgotten figure, but as one of the most intriguing and influential women of the ancient world. Her resting place, untouched, 4A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Retry, and the woman, she had no choice but to become. That afternoon, she boarded a wooden bus after school with her boyfriend, Alejandro Gomez Aras. They were laughing, joking, maybe even arguing. She never did anything in half measures. But just moments later, the bus collided with a streetcar, and in an instant, her future dissolved into chaos, metal, and silence. The crash was devastating. The streetcar crushed the bus against a wall, splintering the wood and hurling passengers. She was pierced by an iron handrail that entered her left hip and exited through her pelvis. Her spine broke in 3 places. Her right leg was shattered. Her foot was dislocated. Her collarbone and ribs were fractured. Her shoulder was dislocated. Her abdomen was pierced. She was only 18. A man covered her with a borrowed coat. Someone noticed that her body shimmered, not with blood, but with gold dust from a pouch she had carried. It had burst on impact, covering her injured body in what looked like glittering ash. She was taken to the Red Cross hospital, where she underwent many surgeries over the coming months. Immobilized in a body cast, she lay flat on her back, battling infection and uncertainty. The dream she had of becoming a doctor drifted further away each day. Yet, in that stillness, something began to awaken. Her father gave her brushes. Her mother fashioned a special easel to hang above her bed. A mirror was mounted so she could see her reflection. There, encased in plaster and in pain, she started to paint, first out of boredom, then with growing obsession. Her first subjects were self-portraits because that was all she had. But it wasn't vanity, it was survival. The accident had shattered her body, but it also opened a door, to her mind, her body, and eventually to a surreal language of pain and identity that would shape her work. The girl who once wanted to heal others began healing herself, one brush stroke at a time. As she lay encased in plaster and steel, her body resisting every breath, she began to paint. What began as therapy became a language, deeply personal, brutally honest and often unsettling, which was entirely intentional. She didn't paint delicate flowers or scenic landscapes. She painted pain, her pain, physical, emotional, existential. Her first works were self-portraits, not from ego, but as she once said, "I paint myself because I'm so often alone and because I am the subject I know best." Her early pieces were small, painted on tin or wood panels inspired by Mexican devotional art, meant to tell stories of suffering and miracles. She internalized this tradition. Her body became the canvas, her emotions the sacred space. She painted herself pierced, bleeding, broken. In one piece, she is impaled by nails like a martyr. In another, she floats in a barren landscape, tethered to a shattered column, symbolic of her damaged spine. She portrayed herself crying, fragmented, even decapitated, but never passive, always present, always watching. She rendered trauma with beauty, resistance, and even humor. Each painting reclaimed her body, her pain, her womanhood in a world that tried to define her. But she wasn't just recounting her story, she was creating a new visual language, a blend of folk art, surrealism, medical imagery, and symbolism. Her paintings became dreamlike dissections of her soul, framed by color, culture, and myth. By the time she could walk again, though not without pain, she was no longer the young woman who had dreamed of medicine. She was now an artist, and her work was unlike anything before it. She had taken the most devastating moment of her life and transformed it into something creative. She didn't merely depict her suffering, she forced the world to confront it. And in doing so, she turned pain into an act of radical self-expression. In 1928, still recovering and still painting, just 21 years old, she met the man who would become the most intense and complex relationship of her life, Diego Rivera. He was 20 years older, already a towering figure in the art world, known for his large-scale, politically charged murals. She had admired his work before, but now she wanted his opinion on hers. She brought her paintings to him, interrupting his work to ask, "Do I have talent?" He looked at them and replied, "Yes, and not just out of kindness." He saw something extraordinary, raw, bold, unfiltered, full of irony, pain, and beauty. Their relationship, both passionate and turbulent, began soon after. She once remarked, "I suffered 2 accidents in my life, one in which a streetcar hit me, the other was Diego." They married in 1929, a pairing that puzzled many. He was enormous in size and ego, and known for his infidelity. Politically recognized, Frida was sharp-tongued and fiercely independent, already relying on a cane. Her parents described her union with Diego as a match between an elephant and a dove. Their relationship was intense yet turbulent. Diego encouraged her artistic pursuits and nurtured her growth as a painter, but his infidelities, including an affair with Frida's sister Cristina, deeply hurt her. In response, Frida pursued her own relationships with both men and women, with rumored connections to Leon Trotsky and Georgia O'Keeffe. The couple divorced in 1939 and remarried a year later under new conditions. Frida retained her independence, her residence, finances, and surname. Their renewed partnership was less about romantic love and more centered on creative collaboration and mutual respect. Despite betrayal and emotional wounds, Diego remained a central figure in her life, provoking her, challenging her, but also believing in her as an artist, a revolutionary, and a woman capable of transforming the world of painting. Their bond was far from calm, but it was unforgettable. In the 1930s, Frida accompanied Diego to San Francisco, Detroit, and New York while he worked on major mural projects. These travels exposed her to American industry, affluence, and the contradictions of capitalism, leaving her disillusioned. A proud Mexican nationalist and committed communist, she was drawn to indigenous traditions. The wealth she saw in the US, particularly during the Great Depression, clashed with her values. In letters, she mocked the materialism and superficiality of American culture, longing for Mexico's rawness, color, and paradoxes. As Diego created massive murals, Frida focused on smaller, more intimate works on tin and canvas. Her unique style emerged sharp, surreal, emotionally charged. Many of her iconic self-portraits came from this period, not as acts of vanity but of survival. Through them, she explored her identity, shaped by physical pain, surgeries, and a miscarriage in Detroit. Her portraits were raw, revealing her suffering and strength with unflinching honesty. In one powerful piece, she depicted herself in a hospital bed surrounded by symbols of loss. It was vivid, emotional, and unfiltered. Returning to Mexico, Frida immersed herself in leftist politics. She and Diego hosted Leon Trotsky during his exile. Her traditional Tijuana dresses were political and cultural expressions, not mere fashion. Her art was inseparable from her beliefs, her body, identity, and ideology entwined. While Diego portrayed revolutions in murals, Frida depicted its toll, fragmented bodies, burning minds, and an unrelenting self-awareness. In the face of exile and illness, she became a symbol of resistance through her art. By the late 1930s, Frida was no longer just Diego's partner. She had become a force in her own right. Her home in Coyoacán, Casa Azul, reflected her spirit: vibrant cobalt walls, Aztec figures, and animals roaming freely. The space was a fusion of tradition and defiance. She filled it with pre-Columbian artifacts, folk art, and revolutionary literature. Dressed in bold Tijuana garments with flowers in her hair, she painted among the scent of incense and the sound of street music. Her creativity flourished. Her paintings became more complex and politically charged. In one piece, she portrayed two versions of herself, one European, bleeding, and one indigenous, strong, expressing her divided identity and personal history. In 1939, she exhibited in Paris, earning admiration from notable artists for her distinct vision. Yet she rejected being labeled a surrealist, insisting she painted not dreams, but her own reality. Her art captured Mexico's essence, not an idealized image, but a dynamic, living culture. Her work overflowed with meaning: skeletons, hummingbirds, hearts, thorns, corn, and blood. She honored indigenous heritage while confronting the country's pain. Despite her worsening health, surgeries, infections, chronic pain, she continued to paint, often from bed, in a corset, brush in hand. Her return to Mexico was not for rest, but to reclaim her power through her art, her beliefs, and an unflinching portrayal of self. She was betrayed, her spine deteriorated, and her right leg was persistently infected. Throughout her life, she endured over 30 surgeries, often in rapid succession. At times, she was confined to bed for months, encased in full body casts or restrained by traction devices that pulled her bones apart. Yet she continued to paint. Each piece became both a form of release and an act of defiance. Her art grew darker and more unyielding. She painted with a precision honed by suffering, refusing to veil her truth in symbolism. In one piece, she portrayed herself split open, her body pierced with nails, her spine replaced by a fractured column, her expression calm, her gaze unwavering. Pain ceased to be merely a theme. It became her constant, her adversary, her inspiration. Her political activism also intensified. She became a member of a leftist party, took part in protests, penned passionate letters, and openly opposed oppression and injustice. When her physical condition made walking impossible, She still attended demonstrations in a wheelchair, holding signs and shouting with conviction. In 1953, she had her first solo show in her homeland, a long-awaited recognition. Her doctors warned against attending due to her fragile health. Undeterred, she arrived by ambulance, lying on a stretcher, placed at the center of the exhibition. Adorned in traditional attire and surrounded by her own creations, she welcomed guests with tequila, laughter, and unmistakable fire in her eyes. Her final paintings were haunting, yet childlike. In one, she depicted herself in a steel brace, embraced by protective hands, rejecting symbols of oppression. Her last known piece was a still life of sliced watermelons, one inscribed with the words, "Viva la vida," long live life. Even as death approached, she remained bold, joyful, and politically engaged. She passed away on July 13th, 1954, at 47, in the same house where she was born. Officially, a pulmonary embolism ended her life, but those close to her sensed it was more than that. Years of pain, surgeries, and physical struggle had worn her down. Just days earlier, she had insisted on attending a protest against foreign intervention, frail and in a wheelchair, her fist still raised. Revolution was her final heartbeat. Her last diary entry read, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." Her funeral took place at her country's most prestigious cultural venue. Draped in a red flag, her body was mourned by loved ones, artists, and fellow activists. Her partner was devastated, calling her the greatest love of his life, despite his betrayals. After her death, her presence only grew. Initially known in limited artistic circles, her work defied easy classification. Too politically charged for some, too surreal for others. But over time, her image and story resonated. In the 1970s and 80s, feminist movements revived overlooked voices, and hers rose above the rest. She came to symbolize transformation through pain, feminism forged in struggle, unapologetic cultural pride, queerness, disability, and unfiltered authenticity. Her face, adorned with a unibrow and flowers, became iconic. Her home became a museum, her diary a cherished document, and her artworks earned places in the most esteemed collections. She had once lived in another's shadow, but in death she emerged fully into the light. Her legacy extended beyond her art. She left a mirror, challenging all to look not with pity or fear, but with courage. Today, her face appears everywhere, on clothing, murals, toys, digital media, and posters. But what gives her legacy true power is not mere recognition, it's the truth that lies beneath her image. She never aimed for perfection. She rejected conformity. She embraced what made her different, her disability, her identity, her convictions, her heritage, and transformed it into enduring art. She became a global emblem of resistance, feminism, cultural identity, and creative courage. For queer communities, she stands as a bold bisexual icon. For women, a reminder that power needs no approval. For disabled artists, evidence that pain can drive creation. And for her country, she remains a beloved folkloric figure, forever a part of its soul. Once dismissed as too strange or too intimate, her paintings are now revered as masterpieces. In this world, works like the two self-portraits with a thorn necklace and hummingbird, and the broken column aren't merely observed, they are profoundly felt by anyone who has endured pain and sought to transform it into something meaningful. She lived on the fringes and brought them into the spotlight. She embodied contradiction, a communist adorned in gold, a betrayed woman who still found love, a fragmented body carrying an indestructible spirit. Through everything, she painted, not just with colour, but with unwavering purpose. Frida Kahlo never aimed to be an icon, she simply expressed her truth. And in doing so, she spoke for countless others who had never seen their experiences mirrored in art. Today, her face represents bravery, vibrancy, defiance. Frida is not lost to time, she is eternal.